This episode brought to you by the following patrons: Leaf Girl, Min, Jason, Sex Caliber Bones a Lot, Madeline, Alyssa, Vixen, Holly, Laura, Jeremy with the laser eyes, Allie, Logan, Libby, Aaron, Kristen, Tia, and Jonathan. And all the patrons want you to know you're loved, you're listened to, and you're a valuable member of this awesome Horror Virgin community. And if you want to hang out with us, do so in the Facebook group where we'll be hanging out and comparing this film to other films daily. I have a hair in my mouth that whole time.
No, I think you're probably possessed.
I guess sometimes mouths just be haunted, guys.
Sometimes mouths just be haunted like that. Thanks for tuning into Horror Virgin. I'm Paige.
And I'm your Horror Virgin Todd, which means I don't like scary movies and you guys make me watch them. And this week we watched The Deliverance. But the one without the banjo.
Yeah, but without the one without the banjo.
But it's got like a gilfed up Glenn Close. So take the good with the bad. You know what I'm saying?
Oh my God, I have so many things to say about Glenn Close. Oh my God. Oh, there's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot.
Yeah. So we watched The Deliverance from 2024 and Paige, clearly it was my first time seeing it.
Yes.
And I think, if I remember correctly from last week when we talked about doing this movie, it's your first time too, right?
It's my first time because like people had said it was good and that they were like kind of surprised by Glenn Close's performance in it. And now I want to go back to all those people and I was like good surprise or like it is surprising.
Yeah, because I would classify it as surprise. I was surprised by it. Yeah.
She committed to the bit. She Daniel Day-Lewis that shit.
Oh, I think there are actual good performances in this too. Like
sure, 100%.
It's not from that standpoint bad or anything. It's just
no.
I don't think I've ever seen Glenn Close do this.
No, and I don't think I have. And here's the thing. She's not giving a bad performance. There's just a lot of choices in this screenplay. A lot. And it's not just her. There's a whole lot of choice. I think Lee Daniels wanted this to be his Hereditary.
Oh my God, this is Lee Daniels? That makes so much sense. Okay, yeah,
yes.
No, I now understand why I didn't like it. Awesome.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that he wanted this to be his Hereditary. And I think there are sections of this movie that come close to something like that.
Okay.
But, and I'll reference the exorcism that we did not too long ago.
I referenced this too, because the same problems I have with that movie, I have with this movie. So yes, I'll reference it too, but go ahead, please. Sorry.
Yeah. This is, again, we have a movie where someone in writing or creating this movie has really hit on a fantastic real world story about the way that addiction can fill kind of a metaphorical exorcism. All of that's there. And I even kind of appreciate that our main character, I'll call them a main character, protagonist.
Ebony?
Is not a perfect protagonist. Yeah, Ebony's not a perfect protagonist.
No, Ebony's pretty bad throughout this entire movie, but like largely because been through a lot of trauma and is currently using what she uses for her addiction, right?
Is currently in active addiction, yes. Yeah. And I feel like there is absolutely a story there for someone to do the work to kind of break that cycle of addiction for themselves, to kind of work with therapy and any number of things. I think the movie tries to do that at a bunch of points. Even having her fight herself at the end, which I felt was very hokey and is not done well, but I understood what they were trying to get at because I was like, in many ways, her personal battle in this movie is with herself.
Yes.
And loving herself and accepting that love.
I love that it went from her son they were doing the exorcism or the deliverance on, and then it became her mom. These are all like the relationships she needs to repair or come to terms with, right?
Right.
And then when it becomes her, I was like, okay, because ultimately she's responsible for herself. And like this,
exactly.
I get all of this. When it got weird to me is when she yelled Jesus like she was like going Super Saiyan.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, we have a very... Pentecostal view, which like
it went full Pope's Exorcist for me at that point. I was like, okay, we went to 11.
Paige, I laughed out loud when she went Jesus.
Oh, I couldn't stop laughing. And I know it was meant to be sincere.
It was so funny to me that like it took me out of the moment just completely. But
Same.
that's also because I grew up with like Dragon Ball Z and stuff. Like I bet Lee Daniels didn't, you know? So like for him, it doesn't evoke that kind of thing. But for me and probably a bunch of people my age and younger, they were like,
yo, same.
A little bit, you know, like they like sort of.
Same.
But like I understood the emotional weight they were trying to convey.
Yes,
it just broke me out of it. I didn't even dislike that emotional like weight. Like I do feel like this movie has too many points it's trying to make and doesn't land any of them.
Yes.
Because it does deal with like the way the mother is abusing the children and is also a product of abuse from her mom, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But doesn't land any of those relationships. It does sort of have this like personal accountability is all that matters. And like, I don't necessarily hate that, but just, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it lands a whole lot of what it's trying to land to me.
And it does have pacing problems, 100%.
I paused it at 39 minutes left because I thought it was almost over. And I was like, oh God, there are 39 minutes left of this lecture? Okay, cool.
That's what we were texting about. Yes. And because it spends a full hour or more before anything really supernatural happens outside of like, we've seen some flies, the kid's acting a little weird. That's about it.
Right.
We have an hour. And that hour is spent digging into her relationships with her kids, her relationships with her mother. It's not a bad movie for that hour. It's just not moving forward. Like the performances are good. I'm invested in their relationships. I'm interested in the story. But I'm like, okay, but now what? Like, I get it. Like, I feel like as the audience, we have a pretty clear understanding of the world that all these people are living in and how their relationships are complicated and intertwined with each other at 20 minutes. And we then sit in it for another 30 at least. And that's where things get a little tricky for me. I mean, again, I wasn't bored. I enjoyed watching the movie mostly till the end. And then I was like, oh, this is what we're doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Because everyone in it is doing a good job. They are interesting characters. They're characters we don't often see. Also, I like that it's an imperfect protagonist is what I will call it. Because it's very human in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's something that like a lot of especially exorcism-based horror movies don't do. Like it's usually Father Amarth or like the best nun that ever nunned. Like maybe they have one thing in their past, but like overall they're like a super Christian. And in this movie, I'm like, this is a real person.
Yeah.
A real person dealing with things so far beyond their control, there's nothing they can do about it. And like, I do like that it asks us to both indict her for the ways that she is making the lives of the people around her worse, but also understand the ways in which she has found herself in this position and is trying her best and is still not doing great. Like, I do appreciate that very holistic view of a very human person.
Yeah.
That said, at the end, when she goes Super Saiyan, I scream laughed. I was like, what? But then at the same time, let me ask you this, because we've watched a ton of exorcism movies at this point, which used to be like my kryptonite. And now I kind of really enjoy them, honestly. But I feel like every time we watch an exorcism movie, it's always like, in the name of Saint whoever and Latin, which I find to be a very old European way of doing things because it's the Roman Catholic Church, right? Like that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, you're like calling down like the, sub-gods.
Right.
The sub-deities that you pray to or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what else to call it. What are they? They're saints? The saints. The saints you pray to.
They're saints.
They're demigods. It's whatever. It's like polytheistic religion.
It's not a part of the version of Jesus I'm in, so I'm not as familiar. But yeah, it does kind of seem that way sometimes. But I thought it was wild that instead of that, we got speaking in tongues, and I kind of liked it better. I was like, no, this seems awesome. Like, because she just literally was like, Jesus, and then it was just like spells. Yeah. And I was like, fuck yes.
I love that when she's speaking in tongues, it posits that it's a whole nother language.
Completely.
And I did go back and turn on subtitles because I was like, oh, I want to see if they even try. I want to see if they even tried. No, I just said speaking in tongues.
Yeah,
but I did go back and turn it on because I was like interested. But it posits that that's a whole different other language, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the word for Jesus in that language is Jesus.
Still Jesus.
Hilarious.
Still Jesus. Let's talk about speaking in tongues for a little bit because Mormons don't be doing that, right?
No.
Okay.
No. And I say it that way because most don't, honestly. Most don't speak in tongues. That's it's a fan fiction of a fan fiction group that does.
It's complicated because different denominations believe different things about speaking in tongues, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So like Martin Luther fanficked and then other people fanficked off ML. And now we are left with evangelicalism, Pentecostalism, and that's more Pentecostalism.
It can be. It occurs in a couple different places.
It does.
And occurs a few different ways. So like the version of Jesus that I grew up in, don't do it. Because their belief is based on the texts that were canonized in around 300 AD, that speaking in tongues refers to the ability to communicate with people that you might not necessarily originally think you could have. And so that God provides ways for you to do that in moments when that could be difficult. And so it's a much more metaphorical view of that scripture.
So God invented cell phones so you could communicate with someone who you couldn't normally communicate with.
Or God gives you the words to express what you mean in a moment where you maybe did not know how to say something. Like it could be a bunch of different things.
Sure.
In the text, it refers to people being able to speak different languages so that they can communicate with people who spoke different languages. It's the whole thing. But some people interpret that as God directly speaking through someone in a language none of us understand because it's God's language and we're mortals and therefore could not understand it. And that it is a translation of being moved by the Spirit. I would say in most cases, it is probably an emotional reaction to being very invested in worship and that it comes out that way. If you were raised in that version of Jesus.
My favorite, have you ever actually seen it happen, Paige?
Not live, no. It was not common.
I've seen it happen in person a number of times. I live in the South.
Oh, no
Paige,
shit. Okay.
My favorite part, and this is very anecdotal. I've seen it happen a number of times over the course of 2 visits to the same church. So I don't know if this is a common practice amongst other places that have this sort of thing happen. But in the cult that I saw that did this, a guy stood up and started speaking in tongues and then someone else stood up and translated.
You have to have a translator. Yes, that's like part of it.
And man, I wanted to, the second time I saw it happen, I wanted to raise my hand and be like, Brother Dennis says that God wants us to go home. The 49ers play later. We got to go. We got to close this service down. That's what my brother Dennis said in Aramaic or whatever.
We gotta wrap it up. So but that's part of the reason that the version of Jesus I grew up in doesn't really do it because they're there has to be a translator and someone who can verify it. And the amount of times that happens that we can verify this, not often. And so it was not a part of my church upbringing. I feel like I have maybe occasionally seen people sing in tongues, but not make it a big deal. They're just singing along with everyone else and whatever comes out, comes out.
Paige, the high part in I believe in a thing called love is very high and it's very fast. Sometimes it comes out weird, all right? I wasn't singing in tongues at karaoke.
Yeah, sometimes it comes out weird. But yes, no, this has not been a part of my in-person church experiences.
Same.
On the regular.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If it makes you feel better and you feel moved to shout things like that and it doesn't disturb the people worshiping around you and it ain't hurting anybody, cool. If it lets you go Super Saiyan and cast out demons, extra cool, bro. Do it.
Even better, and then teach me how to do it. Yeah, if that worked, if I could get out, start yelling in tongues, and lightning bolts would start to grow around me as my hair goes spiky and white, here for it.
Oh, yeah.
Would attend that church.
It reminded me of the exorcism and the wailing, where I was like, this is way better. This is so much more fun and cool. Let's get some drums involved. Let's do it. But yeah, I thought that was a real interesting choice and not necessarily a bad one. I mean, it did make for an unintentional comedic moment.
I did think it made it a little bit more unique because it is sort of the Amityville Horror.
Yes.
And it's a lot of other things we've all seen before. So I did think that was a nice, interesting new thing that they incorporated into this very like formulaic movie. I thought that was kind of cool.
I know we talked about this when we did Exorcist Believer with Eli from God Awful Movies, but like I still really want a non-Christian exorcism. Like I want a movie that is not centered in Christianity, but still deals with this type of a situation.
I mean, it would still have to be it would have to be another religion. You know, it would have to be another.
Yeah.
Because other religions do have that sort of thing. You could do that.
Yeah. All the other religions, whatever religion you want, just not Christian. Because I feel like we get 1.5 million Catholic adjacent Christian versions of this, and they all kind of turn out the same. I want to see a different one. I know people have different versions of this. I still want to see it. And I would love to see when people decide to make exorcism movies, exploring the more grounded elements of like what could cause someone to behave in this way. I do like that they take them to the hospital and take them to therapists and explore medical options first, but not for long.
Yeah, that actually ties into my like first thoughts about the movie because I don't like the movie's point of view really. And that is just like, from my point of view, I don't like it. Like it like looks at social workers and like people who are like working for the government trying to help the poor.
Sure.
Like that is their job. It vilifies every one of them and then glorifies the church, which is very gross to me. It's a very gross point of view. But in this world, that's the way it is. Like, that's the reality of the world that the movie takes place in. So I kind of have to live within that framework. And if you live within that framework, I don't really hate it.
Sure.
Because they are villains in this world. It's just very unlike reality. So it takes me out of this being a real story or a true story.
I do think it brings Monique back around at the end, which is great. But I also fully understand that the system is not great and not every social worker is great. You definitely shouldn't vilify all of them. Most of them are people just trying to help people.
Yeah, it's people like Mikey.
Yeah, exactly. But I also understand the mother's apprehension of what that could mean. But I also, when Monique was like, hey, I think it's for the best that you get some time to figure stuff out and your kids get some time in an environment that is stable. Like, I think that was accurate. Like, I was like, yeah, things are not good. The part where I don't love it is because it's like we put them in church foster care and I'm like, ooh, you know, that can get tricky. Some church foster cares are good. Some are not. And there's documented abuse scandals about it. And like that, I had the same feeling of like, I do think throughout the movie, and I love the speech that he gives Monique's character about when her child tragically died. And she's like, so this is where I'm coming from, where you have your kids. They're in your life. There are things you can do. And here's the thing. As much as Ebony's character is the victim of a whole bunch of stuff happening, like there's a fucking demon in her house, like that's not good. She is trying her best, but there are also elements of like things that she is doing that is actively making her kids' lives worse. Her drinking in particular.
She's abusing her kids. We see it. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that I felt like resonated really well with me, where it was like, I didn't love how much the movie was like, the church will fix it because, you know, hey, hospitals, other things, a lot of things are going to need to go into fixing this. And also, how are they going to explain that lady's dead body in the house at the end? We'll talk about it when we get there. But
I mean, she is dead. Like, she's going to jail for sure. Yeah,
she's going to jail forever. But I did love how human they made Monique in that moment of like, this is not just the man here to take your kids away. This is another person who cares and has been in your shoes and wants the best for those kids. And I think that scene cements that she really does just want those kids to be okay.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's checking in on them at the hospital, like all of it. So like, I think it starts out vilifying her and gets a little bit better as it goes. But the fact that the church fixes it all at the end, I was like, oh, well, hey, maybe not.
Yeah.
But man, she beat to shit at the end of that movie.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Man, when she like, I guess, cast the demon down into the hole in their cellar, I laughed because she said, go back to where you came from. And I love that demon started as her child. And I was like, do you mean your womb, ma'am? That's your son.
Well, and I was like, I was like, is the kid buried under the house now? And then the body was, I was like, oh, okay. Because for a hot second, I was like, did she just, what? But then also it's like, she cratered the floor with her mind. Like,
she went Super Saiyan, Paige. It always leaves a mark.
Super Saiyan. The last hour, 30 minutes of this movie are buck wild. Like, absolutely nuts. But I didn't hate it as far as like watching. I was like, I'm entertained. I'm not going to agree with most of what's going on. And again, there's a dead body in her house. She kidnapped one of her children from a hospital. Uh-huh. So for the movie to be like, she got her kids back 6 months later, I'm like, in what world?
I'd be like, she wouldn't be out of jail in 6 months. She wouldn't. She would probably be in jail for the rest of her life after this.
Probably.
Because she kidnapped her child from government custody. And in the hospital is what I mean by that. I don't know if it was government custody, but like from the hospital where he was getting medical treatment.
Right.
And killed a lady in her basement. So like.
Yeah, no, killed a lady in her fucking kitchen.
Oh, that's right.
It's not even in the basement where she can hide it. And like, what, she gonna get rid of that body? Like all of that. And I was like, what? And we know, like, one would assume from the movie that she has at least not been drinking since she started the deliverance and exorcism process. One would assume. But that's still, even with those 6 months, she barely got a year under her belt. And like, if you want to make a strong case to get your kids back after you kidnapped them, I think you probably got to have a little more time.
I don't know how any of that works, but I guess not.
I have a family member who lost their kids and then got them back because they participated in a sobriety program and they're doing really well. But it took a long time. Yeah. It was not a quick process.
I mean, those programs have like steps, right?
Oh, yeah. So many.
For a reason. Not like the 12 steps, but like actual, like you have to achieve these conditions before we'll release your kids to you kind of steps.
Yes.
I don't know what they are, though.
I think she also had 12 steps. I'm not 100%, but she lived in like a sobriety program.
Yeah.
And then had to demonstrate she could live on her own and that she could provide all the things that her kids need. Like, it was a process.
Yeah.
And she's been sober for years at this point because it took that long to do it.
She's a friend of Bill.
There you go.
I did think it was wild that they named the demon that possesses the child, that possesses Trey. Mm-hmm. Guys, Trey.
Here's what I think they were trying to do. I could be wrong. I thought that they were trying to scratch an early version of like, you are part of it's almost like you are your own worst enemy, right? So it's almost like duplicates, which was wild because like, I think they were trying to pull an Us, but like.
I was thinking that too when you said it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because she does mirror match herself at the end.
Right.
I just thought it was funny that like the demon that sort of is alluded to like started possessing things in the house in the 90s. You're going to call him Dr. Trey? Like, come on. Like, really? Dr. Trey?
Well, the son was Trey. So I'm like, the demon has a completely different name. But yeah, Dr. Trey. I mean,
come on.
Of course, that'd be incredible. But the demon has a different name. We never learned the demon's name. We just learned the name of the last kid he possessed.
I guess that's true. Yeah. And that kid's name is Trey.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Dr. Trey. Now I'm just thinking Dr. Trey in my head. You know, from that 90s group, Demons with Attitude page. Come on. Straight out the cauldron.
Oh, sorry. My God.
A ghostly motherfucker named Ice Doom from the crew that puts your body in a tomb. I don't know, Paige. I'm just spitballing here. It's fine.
I don't know, but I love I love spooky gangster rap. That's great. There's a whole genre. Let's get more of it.
Is it a whole genre? I actually think I'd like that.
There's some of it.
Comedic, spooky gangster rap. Like, I'm here for that.
I mean, I don't think it's comedic. I think it's more hard, but like, you know, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all comedic.
We can make it happen. Yeah.
Nowadays, everybody hear me talk like I took his soul away. Ain't nothing left now because I moved his lips. Just a voice he can't resist. Y'all motherfuckers better forget about Dre because I possessed him. Eat a dick.
Yeah, forget about Trey.
Insanity. Anyway, Paige, maybe we should just get through this movie scene by scene.
Let's do it. It starts with quotes about deliverance. Now, on Cult Podcast, we did a couple episodes on religious practices of deliverance, which are very similar to exorcisms, but not quite. A little more prayer, a little less slapping.
Oof, that sounds less fun. I need my exorcisms with a little bit of Jerry Springer just salted in. You know what I'm saying?
Just a little bit in there.
Yeah.
But also a lot more speaking in tongues and improvement. I'm going to say improvement.
Yeah.
But that second quote is forgiveness for what I've done and deliverance from what I am, which I think really speaks to the role that the movie thinks the church has in this, in that it both wants it to be her responsibility and for her to get better for herself, but it also believes that she needs God to remove the bad parts of herself. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, which is complicated because I feel like they have a really good, strong story about you warring with yourself within an exorcism or deliverance narrative. And then they kind of undercut it with how much the church gets involved. But
to me, it felt very much like, I honestly thought this was going to be like a biting commentary of the way church exploits poor people. And not all church, but some do, right? Like
they don't even touch it. Like they go talk to that lady and I was like, oh, I'm waiting for it.
But the beginning of this movie, like the two quotes felt like religious doublespeak to me, like things that are being said that don't really mean anything if you pull them apart, but sound vaguely important is what it felt like to me. But it ignores all of that, which I don't need it to be that. I just thought that's what it was setting up.
I would say I don't view it as much as doublespeak as I view it as oftentimes, in my experience, growing up in Christianity, Christians will say things that make sense to them and nobody else. They're using their own words. And what they're really trying to say is something that does make sense, but they've talked their way around it in a way that don't make sense. So like this idea of like, I need forgiveness for my sins, but deliverance from the power of sins. It's like, I need to get better, but I also need to address the things that are making it hard for me to get better. That's a simple way to say that makes sense. But instead, I've said this multiple times here and Cult Podcasts, that as Christians, we need to have atheists proofread our shit. Like, give us a copy edit, a once over, be like, does this sound logical? No? Okay, great.
I mean, I don't know that you need that. I don't think you'd want an atheist input on anything you're doing. I don't think Lee Daniels would. The reason I said that about Lee Daniels not loving this movie because it's a Lee Daniels movie, his movies often have a very specific point of view that is like very positive towards the church.
Yes.
And that is just one that I don't share. So I don't mean he's like a bad filmmaker. I just don't like his view on that, and he bakes it into every one of his movies.
I'm just trying to avoid signs that say, let Jesus come in you and stuff. Like we need a proofreader. We need somebody that's going to be like, the internet's going to have a field day with you guys. Can you not?
I need more of those signs. Like that would be amazing. Like that.
They make me laugh. I'm like, guys, come on. Anyway, we open on paintings and we will find out that this is the mural in the kids' room. And it's like choir music that starts out joyful and just turns more and more and more ominous.
Yeah.
But then we get a title card that says Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 2011. We see Ebony working to kind of fix up this house. Dre wants her to see the painting he's made. And she's like, oh, cool, you're a little Basquiat, which is very fun. And he's like painting it. They painted it together. Very, very sweet. Initially, we think this is a sweet family where things aren't going wrong. We're about to find out that's not the case immediately.
Right. Almost immediately. Yeah.
We cut to Glenn Close at church. And it's a whole lot of look, man. I have met many ladies like this during my time because of where I grew up. But if you haven't, it might be a little jarring.
I felt like I was returning to my childhood when I saw it. Glenn Close looks like a very poor woman who's trying to lead a better life than she looks like she has led to this point.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
She looks to me like she's had a rough life.
Sure. Yes.
Has not had a lot of money her entire life.
Sure.
And is just doing the best with everything and is now trying to like better herself through religion, which is not an uncommon path. No. It helps a lot of people. And throughout this movie, she does seem to be leading a much better life than she seems to have led up to this point. So I do think it has helped her.
Yes. Interesting. That is absolutely one element of what's going on. I read this also as, for as much as there are racial divides in this country, there are intersectional divides with classism. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
We've discussed this a lot.
Yeah.
And in certain places, that's more prevalent than other places. I grew up in a place where you have both a very diverse racial mix, but also a very stratified class system. And so you will see people like a Glenn Close who are kind of a minority among minorities. Oh, she probably grew up with all these people. And so the initial
she did.
thought is like, oh, appropriation. It's like, no, she probably grew up with all these, like, this is her people. That's
the culture she was born into. Yeah.
Exactly. She just happened to be white. And I think that is part of it, where she grew up in that neighborhood. And because nobody questions her throughout the movie, nobody really is like, what's that white bitch doing there? It's like, oh, no, that's just her mama. Like, she'd been there forever, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, she probably grew up in that neighborhood. Like,
yes,
that's just Alberta. You know, like, that's just Berta. She crazy. You know what I'm saying?
That's
like,
Alberta, except we know that they moved here because...
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, you're right.
They moved here from Philly. But, like, Philly is another place that absolutely has, like, a diverse makeup and stratified class system. And so you'll see some of that blending. And so I think that is part of it. I do agree. This is very much a lady who lived hard and found religion later in life to try and make something better.
Yes. And I think that's the way they make her look that way. Like in this moment, I think you see that. Like she is just a lady doing her best at church.
Right.
You know?
Right. And rocking every cold shoulder top she can find. Like, just raiding the clearance section at Torrid.
I'm not saying she's not trying to get laid, but she's trying to get laid for Jesus, Paige. For Jesus.
I ain't never going to fault that lady for trying to get some. She still got it. And also, her wig game's strong. Her wigs look great.
Paige, when she had that wig reveal, I lost my mind. I was like, oh, that's not real.
I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was wigs.
My wig dar's terrible. You know this.
Yeah, this is true. But I also, that added another layer for me, I guess, because initially in my mind, white girl from the Bay Area, I'm like, this is a white lady that grew up in a not white neighborhood. And so she does the things that the people around her did. Like, this is just her adopting the things of everything around her because that's what she grew up in. And then when she reveals that wig and you're like, oh no, wait, it's cancer. That's why she's drawing on her eyebrows. That was a whole extra revelation for me where I was like, oh, because of where I come from, I read this very differently. Okay. So I don't know if some of this is because of the cancer and that's how, like, because of her eyebrows, because of her lost hair, that she then became a wig queen, or
was she always a wig queen? Yeah, you don't know. They're great wigs.
They're great wigs.
I did wonder if Glenn Close's character, or Bertie or Berta or whatever, only sought out religion when she found out her cancer diagnosis.
Ooh, that is a great, great question. And I would not doubt it.
It's a common path for a lot of people.
It's a common path. I also feel like sometimes a cancer diagnosis is the thing that changes a lot of things in people's lives, because we know from Ebony's conversations that Berta used to drink, used to do all kinds of stuff back in the day, and now she doesn't. Like, there's a stopping point. So I figured she either found church during a 12-step, like, which is very common for a lot of people. That
one of them is to submit to your higher power. It is by nature a theist program,
right?
Although it doesn't dictate what God.
Yeah, it could be anything.
It does dictate that. It's why a lot of people don't like it. And when I say a lot of people, I mean like mainly atheists.
Yes.
Everyone else is sort of fine with it, which is cool. Like, whatever works for you, use. I don't care.
I have always understood the higher power thing to mean whatever you choose, which could be anything.
That's the way most people position it. Yeah. And that's why I don't know. I'm not very negative on anything that helps people. I don't care what you use. As long as it works for you, use it. That's great.
Yes. I will say there is a problem with if you are court ordered into sobriety programs, most of them are 12-step based. Yeah. And usually you don't have a choice and they don't work for everybody. So I wish there were more choices or the ability to choose depending on what ends up working for you. But I also think that, like, it's worked for a lot of people.
It has.
I just wish people had choice. I ascribe to it's whatever you choose that power to be. But I thought maybe she would have found religion in that, but she could have also gotten sober because she got diagnosed with cancer. That happens to a lot of people too.
It does, yeah.
Of like, they find out they have cancer and it's like, you got to stop doing everything. And so it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
But it seemed recent, which to me would suggest that it was maybe hand in hand with that cancer diagnosis.
That's what made me think that too. Yeah, but we don't get any sort of confirmation of that in the movie, and nor does it really matter in the movie.
It doesn't super matter.
Yeah.
We cut to dinner that night, and it's contentious. It's tough because we know, because we have kind of watched Ebony trying to fix the house up and trying to pay bills and not having money and all kinds of stuff, that she is trying so hard to hold shit together. She's not perfect. we will see her literally abuse one of her children in this scene.
Literally in this scene, yeah.
It's not good.
And like we've seen, they are very coded as poor because we see her daughter, I think her name is Shantae. She's using like a phone that's like the screen is cracked on it and all that stuff. And it's just like, it's very clear that like they're struggling financially because it then cuts to like her mom, Ebony, like looking over bills with like a solar calculator from 1991.
Yeah.
Like we didn't just see that her daughter had a smartphone. Anyway, I thought that was hilarious. But like it's just positioning them as like they're struggling financially.
Yeah. And Glenn Close is Ebony's mom, we find out. And she basically is like, ew, this has too much garlic, which no such thing. Unless you're a vampire, no such thing.
Paige, I really do think they're just trying to make Glenn Close the worst in this scene. And I do think that Glenn Close is not great. She's not a great person in the movie. She's not terrible, but I think you don't understand because you don't have the context when you're watching the beginning of this scene that Ebony is an abusive alcoholic.
Right. You're learning it as this is happening.
Right. So some of this like harshness from Glenn Close's character feels so pointed and mean. But also later in the movie, looking back on it, you're like, maybe that was an overstep or overreaction, but I understand the want to do that and to step in and to try and be helpful. But she does start off by like picking on her cooking, which is crazy.
Yeah, picking on her cooking, criticizing the way her house is run. And initially you're like, Glenn Close is a bitch.
Yeah.
And then later in the movie, you'll be like, Glenn Close is trying to help these kids. She ain't perfect either, but like.
Yeah, she's also flawed, which I don't hate.
I don't hate that
Like,
either.
that's why I was bringing that up. Like, she does pick a fight here.
Yeah.
But she is also here to maybe try and help the situation, and she doesn't do it well most times because she's a flawed character, which is fine.
Yeah.
But she just comes off like a bitch in this first scene.
She does. And I think part of the reason Ebony gets so mad is because, like, I see this happen a lot in roast circles because you're making fun of each other all the time, is that if you really get somebody, it's way easier for other people to join in and target one person, right? It is easy to pile on. And because Glenn Close started it, it kind of made it feel like it was okay for the kids to do it too. And now Ebony's on the outs. It's not good. What Ebony does with that, also not good.
Right.
It's none of it's okay. Because Ebony, after Dre is like, I'm not lactose intolerant. You just don't want to buy milk because you cheap, which like, it's not okay to hit people. But you also understand her being frustrated in the moment of like, I worked my ass off for that fucking milk. Like you little bastard. But you can't hit people. You can't. And she does in this moment. It's bad. And we know she's not drunk in this moment. We've been with her all day.
Right.
So the drinking is a problem. The abuse is also a problem. It's separate because she hits him while he's holding a fork, which cuts his lip.
Yeah.
So he's bleeding. Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, she abuses him. It's sad.
I mean, it was bad to hit him regardless, but there's bleeding. It's bad.
Yeah.
But this causes even more of a fight between her and Glenn Close.
Yeah, because when Glenn Close like moves over to like comfort him, and Ebony moves over to comfort him,
she tries to sniff Ebony's breath.
Yeah, because she's trying to see if she's drunk, which in that moment you're like, what was that? That was weird. And then you understand when you put it together, you're like, oh, she wants to see if she's drunk.
Maybe this is just my experience of having people in my life who have been through that particular substance journey. But the second she sniffed, I was like, alcoholic. Yeah. I like knew it. Yeah. I was like, But they then kind of cut away to the other kids at the table who are texting with their dad.
Yeah.
And we don't know where the dad is yet. We will find out. But they're like, when are you coming home? Like, and they're like, hopefully soon. He's like, Mom is crazy. And then he's like, is she drinking again? And they're like, there's a chime, but we don't see what they answer.
Okay, Paige, I have a question for you.
Okay, great.
Where's the dad?
Iraq.
Okay. And it's what year?
2011.
So we did have soldiers in Iraq in 2011, right?
Yeah.
Here's why I don't think he's in Iraq.
Oh, tell me. Okay.
He's talked about like they're just separated a lot.
Yes.
I think Iraq is like, Iraq in quotes is like, he doesn't want to be here right now.
Oh, interesting.
Because they, at the end of this movie, are just like, we're going to work it out. I'm going to take you, we're going to go see dad because we're working it out. Are you taking everyone to Iraq? Like, if he's a soldier, he's deployed and you guys are still married, you're getting benefits, all that stuff.
Right.
Like, what is actually happening in this relationship?
So, time out though, because, and this is the only reason, when she is talking 2, Monique in that one scene, in one of the scenes where Monique comes to visit the house, she's like, oh, he wants custody? What's he going to do? Move them all to Iraq? And I was like, that's not how that works at all.
Right? Exactly.
That's not how that works at all.
I felt like Iraq was a code word that like the adults in the room used for like, he's in Cincinnati.
I don't know.
Because he took another job because you're an alcoholic. You know, like.
I mean.
Just because of the way they speak about him the whole movie, he also might just be in Iraq. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. He's just gone. It's just the way they talk about him fundamentally doesn't understand why he might be in Iraq in 2011.
Right. Well, and like the idea that he would take the kids with him on deployment was bonkers to me. I was like, no, I don't think that happens. But also,
it doesn't happen. You don't get to take your children to an active war zone. I'm also pretty sure in December of 2011 is when we withdrew from Iraq.
I don't remember.
I don't really either. It's been so long, but pretty sure I'm right.
Possibly. Well, maybe that's why he's like, hopefully I'm coming home soon. Because in the end, when she doesn't say, let's go see your dad, she's like, we're moving to Philly. I've been talking to your dad. We're going to work it out, which could mean distance. But the way they reference Iraq as if he could come home at any moment is bonkers.
It does seem like it's his choice to be away.
Unless he's just in Iraq on business. Like it's like he's not in the army.
I work for BlackRock, or what was that mercenary company that
yeah, that's BlackRock
or whatever. I can't remember. I don't think it's BlackRock. It's something like that.
Something like that.
They changed their name. They like, but whatever.
Or he's just like, I work for Chevron. Like, whatever.
Right?
Anyway, allegedly, the dad's in Iraq.
Right. Oh, Iraq, Maine? Like, where is he?
Iraq, Maine?
I mean, it just seems like he's like in a different city and like could come home whenever. If he's a soldier, like, I don't know. To me, it's either bad writing or bad writing, because talk about him like he's a soldier, or talk about him like he's in another city and place that city. You don't have to say Iraq.
Right.
You could say he's in Cincinnati and the script stays the same, more or less.
Well, and if you want to talk about how hard it is for military families to exist without their loved ones, that's a fucking whole story, man.
I know. Like, it's right there and they're not touching it. It's like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It could have been that. He could have been dead. Could have been another one. Because all of it, I'm like, initially I thought he was perhaps dead or had left them. Just like left. Like they don't know where he is. And that's part of what has contributed to Ebony's substance abuse. Because like, that's a hard thing to deal with. She's shouldering all of it on her own. Like, that's tough. Like, It's still not okay and you still have to deal with it. But like, I can understand how that happens.
Yeah, but unfortunately their dad's in Maine. So he just can't come to dinner right now.
Oh, man. Anyway, we cut to them going to bed that night and they're like, ew, it really smells in here and there's flies. Now, like, I don't know about you. Your girl hates bugs. I don't like flies. In our old apartment, there was like a problem with the trash disposal, like the garbage disposal. And sometimes things would get stuck and then you'd get flies. It was the grossest shit ever. I would like demand people come fix the garbage disposal. So nice that I have a house. This doesn't happen anymore. But how long would it take you to be like, I'm going to find out where the flies are coming from and I'm going to get rid of it? Like,
it would take me as long as it takes me to pick up my phone and Google pest removal services.
That's what's up. Well, but you have the money to do that. Let's say you didn't, right?
It would take me a while.
Let's say you got to hunt this down on yourself.
Paige, I don't believe in anything supernatural, and it would take me a lot longer than it takes them, because I know there's a demon under my house. Like, I'm not going under there. Are you crazy?
Crazy?
I don't believe in any of it. Not fucking with it.
I don't even mean the demon part. I just mean I'm like, where these flies coming from? I'm gonna get fun of
this. Yeah, where these flies coming from? Where all these bugs coming from? Yeah, I don't think I would look into it that hard. I mean, I would probably like, oh man, if I was in their situation, I'd have to, because you can't afford to call somebody. But that would be hard.
Yeah,
I would hate that. I would hate all of that. I'd walk out there in like a scuba suit.
Ooh, when I worked at Sur La Table, the store that I worked at that isn't there anymore, so don't worry about it. But for a while, we had a real bad rat problem that we had to, because the building was 100 years old and it's right next to where the fires happened. And I would bet there's so many more rats there now because the fires probably pushed them into it. However, it was a super old 100-year-old building. And so there were rats because we couldn't like stop up all the holes. Eventually we did, but it took forever. And like flies and smells and all of it, it's the grossest. And I started, like, I had to deal with it. I was the store manager. And so I have a policy of like, if it's off, I'm finding it right the fuck now, like right now. So like in our house, we saw one cockroach I had pest control here the very next morning. Like, I don't fucking play.
That would be me because I can afford to call people. Yeah, like same.
During the night before they got here, I was pouring boiling water down the sinks and shit. Like, I don't play.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that move before. You're not, yeah.
Anyway, but this is our first indicator that something is off in the basement, which when she was like patching that wall earlier, I was like, did she kill the dad? And is the dad in the basement? But no, that is not the case. That would have been a really fascinating movie. Who's texting them, right? Is dad the demon? Oh my God.
Oh my God.
I feel like as we're talking about this, we're writing cooler movies.
That's because this feels very derivative of other haunting movies. It does. Until she goes Super Saiyan, it feels very similar.
Yeah, that's true. But we see Dre get up in the middle of the night, drink so much milk. He's going to regret that, just gastrointestinally. And there's bread pudding in the fridge. Like, cool. Anyway, he then walks outside and looks at a dead bird.
That he calls Trey. Or when he sees a picture of a bird later, he says that's Trey.
Yeah.
I was like, Dr. Trey ain't no bird.
Ain't no bird.
He's a world-renowned record producer. I mean, he signed with After Death Row Records, Paige.
There you go.
Come on.
I think he's insinuating that maybe Trey put a head out on that bird.
Yo, that's Trey's handiwork.
That bird got murked.
You know, fuck with Trey, he'll kill your bird.
Yeah, exactly. He's serious.
Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Pat.
We're from Seek Treatment Podcast, and we're here to talk about Blue Land. Do you know what I'm so about right now, Pat?
What? Tell me. Do not tell me.
Well, ready for this? I just heard that we're eating and drinking roughly a credit card's worth of plastic a week. Yeah, that's right.
Oh my God.
I know. The products we're using are contaminating our water supply, generating hundreds of microplastics that we're eating. So here's the good news. You're never going to believe this. Blue Land is doing something about it. They're eliminating the need for single-use plastic in the products we reach for the most.
From cleaning sprays to hand soap, toilet bowl cleaner, and laundry tablets, all Blue Land products are made with clean ingredients that you can feel good about. Blue Land is trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. That's correct.
They offer refillable cleaning products with a beautiful, cohesive design that looks great on your counter. And refills start at just $2.25. You can even set up a subscription or buy in bulk for additional savings. I used my Blue Land spray today. I cleaned my dirty yoga mat with my Blue Land all-purpose spray today. It smelled good. It got the job done. And the bottle looked beautiful while doing it.
Blue Land has a special offer for listeners. Right now, get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/save15.
You won't want to miss this. Blueland.com/save15 for 15% off. That's blueland.com/save15 to get 15% off.
Anyway, we cut to the next day. She's trying to pay bills. The kids are walking home from school. They're getting bullied by the neighborhood kids. I do love that she goes and slaps the shit out of that neighborhood kid when she finds out he was bullying Nate. I was like, that's right.
Yeah, although I wouldn't do that because you might get shot. Like
you might get arrested for hitting a kid, I think is more what I'd be worried about.
I got the impression that he was maybe 19 or 20. Like he probably an adult.
Yeah.
But it's still assault.
Yeah, it's, you know.
So yeah, you can still go to jail for that, I suppose.
Got to be careful who you hit. Keep it open hands.
I don't live in this type of area, and I wouldn't walk down to my neighbor and kick them in the nuts because they might shoot me. In fact, it's probably more likely because of the area I live in, the South.
I was going to say, that's more likely where you live.
So like, I would never do this in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression that the neighborhood kids knew who she was and they weren't going to fuck with her. And so that's why very little fighting back happens. Yes.
Exactly. And Paige, they just moved there. So like, she established her dominance of this street as like the mother hen immediately when they got there.
I love it. Be scared.
She was like, oh, Ebony? Yeah, watch out for Ebony. Because sometimes she's cool as shit. Sometimes she'll come kick you in the nuts. And it's on you, honestly. Like, just be nice to her kids.
Yeah. This is the opposite of how I have operated in my neighborhood, where I went to talk to a neighbor because they were taking care of one of the local cats. And the cat had kittens. And I was just checking to make sure they had everything they needed to like get the cats fixed or whatever. And they were like, wait, what house do you live in? And I was like, this one. And they were like, oh, we thought that guy lived alone. Like, people were like, I've never seen you, stranger. Just me in my hoodie at home working in the office.
Yep.
But they're like, we didn't know that guy had a wife. We wondered why he had 2 cars. I was like, well, all right.
I'm the other car, I guess.
I'm the other car. Anyway, so we find out that her car's about to get repossessed unless she makes a payment. So she's going through all the codes in the house to try and like, I mean, she's putting away laundry, but she's also checking pockets to try and find any money that they have.
She's more or less just like holding her kids by their ankles and shaking them before they leave the house. She's just trying to find any money that she has access to, no matter where it is.
Been there.
Which, like, also, does she have a job? Like, do we ever see her working?
Yes, she's a hairstylist.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she has a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's where you would get money.
Yeah. But here's the thing. It's like, to a degree, right? Like, you can't get more money than they pay you. So, like.
I know. Well, and so much of that job is like, you might get an hourly. It might be booth rental, so you might get all of it. Like, so like, but it is very like client based.
Yep.
So it might ebb and flow, and it's a bad month, you know? And I would assume if you just move to an area and you're trying to build a business, it's a lot of bad months as you're building it.
Yep.
So it made sense.
Yep. But in Nate's closet, she finds both a bottle of Absolute and a kind of wad of bills.
Yeah.
And this is when they come home and the neighbor kids have been messing with them. She comes out to confront him of like, why the fuck do you have this? And he's like, why on earth do you think I would drink after watching what it does to you? Which is like, oof. I mean, I feel like kids of alcoholics go one way or the other. Either like, I won't ever fucking touch the stuff because of what I saw, or they are conditioned into it eventually because that is the norm in their house. And so clearly he's the former of like, I ain't touching that shit. Like,
I've seen in families it be one of them is like a teetotaler, will never touch the stuff.
Yep.
And one of them is like the opposite, you know? So like it's interesting how that happens, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But he is definitely coded as the kid who is like, no, I am trying to save all of us because you're an abusive alcoholic.
Right.
And I am now big enough to defend myself and thereby extension, hopefully my siblings. But he's not doing anything to like hurt his mom in this moment. He's just trying to keep the alcohol away from her.
No, but later they will fight.
Yeah, exactly.
But he basically is like, I was trying to keep it away from you.
Yeah.
Like, I was high. He's like, I should have thrown it out. Which, like, yeah, throw it all out. Like, people will find it if you hide it. Throw it.
Yeah.
But she then messes with the kids, kicks that guy in the balls, comes back, and Glenn Close is like, you shouldn't have done that. And she's like, fuck you. You would have done that. Like, the way you raised me and you're going to criticize what I'm doing? No. And I know you have the church right now, but like there was a whole lot of years when you didn't.
Yeah.
And the church doesn't just erase those years. Like there was a pattern you established.
She was more or less like Glenn Close was saying, you shouldn't do that. And she goes, well, I learned it from watching you, Mom.
Yeah.
Like more or less as this scene.
Which again, you always want to try and break the cycle.
Yeah.
But again, you only have the tools that you have.
Exactly.
So we cut to the backyard where she's just trying to like calm down and have a cigarette by herself.
Was this a cigarette page?
Oh, I mean, who knows?
The only reason I ask is because marijuana is brought up later.
It is, yeah.
And I honestly think it might have been a joke reference to this because she says, does that include marijuana? And she goes, yeah, it includes marijuana. And she goes, then no, I haven't had any.
No, I have not.
So anyway, I thought that might be this. Although I don't know. It could be either.
It looked like a cigarette. I'll call it a cigarette.
It did. It kind of did. Yeah.
Honestly, like, hey, nothing's better after beating up a 19-year-old than a sweet, sweet J.
Than a hopeful 19-year-old.
Yeah. No, it looked like just a cigarette to me. But so she's just trying to like calm down.
I just like that moment later in the movie. And if it was obviously weed, it would have been funnier to me. Like that would have been very funny. No, I haven't smoked it.
Yeah, I think the movie wants us to assume that she smokes weed because she also drinks. And I'm like, in my experience, some people do it together, but usually people are one or the other.
That is my experience as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, as she's trying to calm down, Dre is talking to himself and she's like, what? She
even says, I told you to stop talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, so this is something he does.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, Mom, you forgot about Trey.
Yeah.
Because that's his imaginary friend that he's talking to.
You should have never forgotten about Trey. Can't believe you forgot about Trey. But also, here's the thing. Kids do talk to themselves just in general. Like, so I think it's probably not easy necessarily for parents to even parse of like, is this normal kid weirdness or do I need to book a specialist?
I mean, if your kid is having full on like hallucinogenic conversations with like a person named Dr. Trey, who was signed by Suge Knight, which is only a pun if you're reading it. Sorry, that joke was way funnier written.
It was. I was like, in my brain was like, I got you. Yep. Speaking of dangling people by their ankles. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I wrote that too. But speaking of this scene, like if your child is just like having normal imaginary friends, like that does seem more common than like someone who's like hallucinating full-on conversations with another person, right? Like if you're a lonely child and you're pretending to play with somebody else, but you know you're playing pretend, that's different than someone thinking that thing, that their imaginary friend is real, right? I guess that's the differentiation for me.
I don't even make a differentiation there because kids, especially lonely kids, do weird shit. And usually they just grow out of it.
True.
So the question is, have they grown out of it? And are there other indicators of like other things going on?
I would say Dre is of the age that like, I would assume this kind of thing is common.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
But I mean, I do think, because he's like 10, right? Is he? I'm not sure if they say, but he does seem in that age range.
In the real story that this is based on, that we will get to at the end, that it is gross that they made a movie out of it. Oh my God. But
it's always that way when they make a movie out of that kind of thing. Like, yeah.
That kid was 12. I don't think Dre is 12.
That might be a little old for it. I think he's portrayed a little younger in the movie. So
I think
for me,
so
it
too.
felt like, okay, maybe like imaginary friend. I get it. That's fine.
Maybe imaginary friend. Yeah. Anyway, we get after this a nice kind of dinner and time for them to all hang out. They're all watching a movie together. They're doing each other's hair.
I like the generational hair doing. I thought that was cool because you have the granddaughter of Glenn Close sitting in front of the TV watching the TV. Then you have Ebony doing her hair and then Glenn Close doing
Ebony's hair.
Her hair. And I was like, oh, Glenn Close, if you're doing Ebony's hair and Ebony's doing her daughter's hair, who's doing your hair? And no one needs to do her hair because it's a wig.
You can actually style wigs and people often do and set styles in. So,
well, yeah, but
someone might still be doing her hair.
I'm not saying that her hair wasn't styled.
Oh, no, I know.
On those wigs. I think that they were well styled for what they were going for.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you don't have to do it like every time, right? Like you just set it and forget it, unless it gets messed up.
I would say you refresh your style, not everywhere, but probably routinely. Anyway, but in this moment, we find out that she's telling Shantae, like, hey, things are bad. I might not be able to give you the big birthday you wanted. And we know that Shantae wants a new phone. We never find out how Ebony gets that phone later. Who's to say? It could have been her friend at the party who clearly steals things for money, which, hey, if you're going to do it from Saks. So like, maybe they helped. iPhones are kind of hard to steal from what I understand, but Shantae is kind of like, this is fucked up. I wish Dad was here. I'm tired of being broke, which like, oof, understandable, man. Yeah. Like, understandable.
Having grown up in situations like worse than this, because they have like a house.
Right.
Like I understand why poor people really hate being poor because it's terrible.
It sucks. It's awful.
Yeah.
I also think there's a disconnect sometimes as a kid when you're poor as a kid because you're like, this is awful. I know it's awful. I know we're poor. I know this sucks. But you're a little bit divorced from how hard your parent is working to try and make it not awful.
Well, because they're hiding that from you probably. Yeah.
100%.
I really benefited from my mother and my dad, like life is beautifuling our poverty as a child to me. Right. I didn't really know we were poor until like middle school.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh shit, you guys get clothes from a store?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, look.
Like someone from your church doesn't bring you your food? Interesting.
Oh, that happened to us a couple times.
Yeah.
For me, it was more that like I couldn't fit into most people's hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
Like except for adults because,
Yeah.
So that's why they had to buy my clothes at the store. And I'm sure it was frustrating. But that's also how I ended up with some of my best clothes because we went to Walmart and they had the weird fish Doc Martens that apparently no one else wanted to wear. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
So everyone it kind of breaks up the nice moment. Everyone goes to bed. She goes downstairs. She's kind of cleaning up the kitchen and she notices that the basement door is open. And so she kind of shuts the door. We cut up to Glenn Close. This is where she does the wig reveal and you're like, oh my God, cancer. But also like, again, so many cold shoulder tops. Like why do all plus size clothing manufacturers think our lower arms and the tops of our shoulders are cold, but not the rest of our shoulders?
I don't think Glenn Close cared so much about her temperature and more about what she was willing to reveal.
Sure, but I also don't. Has anyone ever been like, that's sexy? They make all our clothes like that. I have to actively try not to buy shirts like this because they want to make every plus size girl wear this shit. And it's bonkers to me. Do they think that's the only appropriate part of us to show? I hate it. Don't like it.
Yeah.
I'll wear my full sleeves and have my titties out. I don't care.
Please do. Like, yeah, that sounds fine. I would be fine with Natalie doing that.
I'm crop topping it all year.
Crop that top.
Crop that top. She goes to dialysis where she meets Omar Epps, who will be like both her nurse, or not dialysis, it's chemo.
Yeah, it's chemo.
Will be her nurse at chemo, but also they have like a full-on relationship after this that is like a real side quest in this movie that I was like, I'd watch their movie. Like just their movie.
Like, just Birdie's final ride. Is that what that's called?
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
because she dies in this movie, and like
she does die in this movie.
But they're like, I thought it was wild that she goes to chemo to pick up a nurse. I was like, hell yeah, Glenn Close.
Get it.
You get it while you're getting out. Like, I loved it.
She was just like, why haven't you asked me out yet? Like, I've seen you here like 3 times. And the other ladies are like, nasty.
Yeah.
Like, girl, no. But then Omar Epps is like, catch me outside. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like, catch me outside. How about that?
Okay.
And like, I mean, Glenn Close, there's something about it. I get it.
Magnetism.
I like how like Omar Epps is like, I work here for a reason.
To pay my bills. But it's also nice to meet the hotties
yeah,
like,
exactly.
while I'm here. But as she's leaving, this is when we find out that her treatments are being paid for by her daughter, which is like so incredibly expensive. We hear the phone call later that's like, you have $30,000 in back pain. And it's like, Jesus Christ. Like, that's so insurmountable. Like, and that's on top of, it's already hard to pay for an entire family of people while you're doing shit. Like, it's already hard.
Yeah.
And I got the impression that Glenn Close was also a nurse of some sort because we see her in Scrubs a couple times.
Well, and doesn't Ebony use her scrubs and badge to go break her son out
Yes, later.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I think she works there.
Yeah.
Not Ebony. I think her mom works at that hospital specifically.
Yes, but like even on, let's call it a nurse's salary and her hairdresser salary, they're trying to provide for a family of 5.
Yeah.
And that's hard as fuck, not even counting the 30 grand. And also, can we have a moment for how fucked up it is that a nurse doesn't have health coverage? Like, you're working at the hospital and they ain't even gonna help cover your cancer.
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking America, man.
Yeah.
Fuck. Hate it.
I don't think Lee Daniels would. That's not what I'm saying by this, but I think this family, like the characters in this family would have liked Luigi is all I'm saying.
I think they would have understood his motivations.
Yeah.
Anyway, we cut to, they basically told her, they're like, we haven't accepted Medicaid in a year. Your daughter's been paying for it so that you can keep coming here, which to me was like, okay, maybe that's why they moved so that she could stay going to that chemo place.
Maybe.
And they're like, I assumed you knew. Anyway, we cut to later that night. Glenn Close is home. All the kids are home. But Ebony's walking home drunk. And she's like, before you say anything, I didn't drive home. And Glenn Close is like, I just found out you were making my chemo payments today. And this is all, again, nothing scary has happened. We're like 30 minutes into the movie of like, who's paying for the chemo? Who's this person? Who's this person? It's too many people. It's too much stuff. Too much all in one.
It's too many people. I mean, it's also too many, like, they're trying to set up too much, I think. And that's why they don't really land at the end. I think there's just too much in this section.
Right.
And that, to me, I think is why the pacing feels off.
Right.
And it feels like it doesn't quite land what you think it's trying to land from this section.
Right. We then cut to Ebony goes to sleep and has a flash of what we will find out later is a sexual assault.
Yeah.
That is a just buried piece in this movie of like, you had the story of like, she has struggled. She has had bad times in her life. She's trying to do better. She is fighting herself to do it. That is one cohesive story.
Yes.
That all the pieces for that are here in this movie. And instead we're going all 50 different directions instead of just the clear through line for what would have been if they had really stuck with that as their central story and kind of edited out a lot of kind of the things around it. Oh, this would have been a great movie.
It would have been.
Like, that would have been really good. Like, there are flashes of really good things here.
I agree completely. I just don't think it lands any of them.
It doesn't.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
But she gets up because she thinks somebody's in the house. She's yelling, like, who's in my house? She ends up barfing in the sink. Don't watch this with headphones. And Nate comes downstairs and is like, hey, where the fuck is my money? Like, I know you took it because I know you found the bottle of Absolute. Where's my money? And she's like, where did you get all that money? And he's like, Dad sends me money orders and I cash them so I can save up to get away from you. And I love that her response to this is just a word. Like, Oh, it's like that?
And he goes, word. And I was like, hell yeah, no cap. Let's do this. Although this was 2011, so it would have probably been word back then, not no cap.
It would have been. And they get into a physical fight. And Dre hears them and tries to stop the fight.
Yeah, and he trips on the bat as he comes into the kitchen because it's dark. It's dark outside, right?
It's dark.
So like he gets hurt here.
He gets hurt. And like, I guess trigger warning. I have known many people in my life who have unfortunately had abusive parents and also abusive structures within the household where they have gotten in between their parents and the people fighting their parents. And that is so rough.
Yeah.
And so brutal. And it's one of those things that you're like, man, like it's all layering in. And again, that's why I'm like, there's no bad performances here or anything. It's like, this is all layering into that story. We just need to have the clearer through line for the story. Because none of it feels out of place. It all feels in character. It's just that, do we need to see every second of this? Or does the audience already kind of understand?
Yeah, we get it.
And I think they already kind of understand.
I agree.
Well, unless you were doing this as like a TV show, and then it'd be different. But
yeah, this is an empire. Come on.
Yeah. She puts the money back in his desk.
Yeah.
And apologizes and is like, please don't leave.
I think when he has an actual explanation for where he got the money, she's like, oh, okay.
Right.
You're just trying to get to Maine.
You're not dealing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not selling drugs. Because I understand, especially if he was like being bullied by the quote corner boys, why that might sort of imply maybe he's also dealing drugs or something. So like she wanted to flesh out what was going on, right?
Yeah, because I mean, it is the corner boys. They could have put him on, but like...
Oh, I thought that they might have beaten him up because he was just happened to be selling on the street too, right?
Yeah, or because he wouldn't.
No, I think that they did because he wouldn't. I think you're right about that. I think her fear is that they did because he was starting to sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, we cut to the next day and a pest removal guy finds a dead cat in the basement. Super gross. And that would smell to high heaven. So like, yes, plus the flies. Who do you think killed the cat?
I mean, it's clear that Dr. Trey killed the cat, Paige.
I think so too.
Yeah, probably Dre, her son, because Dre is possessed, right?
Right. I did love the pest control guy being like, oh, I'll put it back. I was like, that's the way to handle that.
That felt accurate too. Like if I was a pest guy and they weren't going to pay me, I'd be like, I'll just leave it then. It's fine.
I'll just leave it.
Yeah.
She does say something super fucking racist to him that is gross and awful and does not need to be in this movie and doesn't help her character at all.
She is a flawed character. Like she is not positioned as a good person.
She's not. Did we need this one? No.
No, I'm not saying it should have been there. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
But they do set her up as a flawed character. So like, okay.
Yeah. But this is where Monique shows up as Cynthia, the DCS representative.
Yeah.
And she has clearly been with them for some time. And she's like, hey, when you move, you have to tell me. I have to make sure the house is okay. I have to make sure the kids are okay. And in this initial scene, she seems like a hard ass because she's like, I just came from their school and they didn't say it was good. They said things were bad.
Yeah.
So like, what happened to your arm? What happened to these bruises? What happened to all this stuff? And she kind of excuses the kids.
Yeah. She's like, excuse me, kids. I got to talk to your mom alone.
Yeah.
Because all the kids are like, I don't remember where I got these bruises, which I'm laughing because it's like so blatant that is what a kid would say when they're being abused by their parents and their parents are in the room, right? So like, of course that social worker needs to have a private conversation with Ebony.
Of course. Well, and within the story, we know that they don't remember. They are getting them at night and they don't know. But like, that is 100% the thing that you can and would and should report.
Yeah. Like I understood why the teachers at the school told that social worker off screen, maybe you should go to the house and talk to them. Because like they do have a lot of bruises and they don't know where they're getting them.
And teachers are mandatory reporters.
Yes.
In most states. And so yes, like all this makes sense. Now, this is where we get their father made allegations. What, is he going to take them to Iraq? And I'm like, what? No.
Exactly. They talk about it like it's a place in Maine or something.
Right. But then she's like, look, they allowed you to keep the kids as long as I monitor the situation. So like, put them first, fix this shit, fix your house. And Glenn Close kind of gets into it with her because I think Glenn Close is like, she's going to take the kids away. We can't let that happen. And I think in Glenn Close's mind, she doesn't want the kids to end up in the system because she believes the system might fail them, which is possible. I watch Law and Order. It happens. But I also feel like perhaps that desire to keep them out of that system is clouding her judgment to how bad things really are in the house. And that's kind of a problem.
Yeah. I think she's lying to herself about her own alcoholism and abuse of her children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we cut to Shantae's birthday. She does get her the phone. Everyone seems to be having a good time. Omar Epps is there grinding up on Glenn Close.
Yeah, he knows what he's there for.
And then they send Dre to bed, but then all of a sudden Dre is in the basement sleepwalking, banging his head on the door.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not good.
Not okay. But he's like, I was talking with Trey. And they're like, and he's like, he lives in the hole downstairs or sometimes in my closet. And everyone's like, what is wrong with your children? Like,
yeah.
So she sends it back to bed and she starts drinking downstairs and everyone is not happy about it, which, like, if you have ever had a friend who struggles with alcohol, you are familiar with the party disbursement where everyone was like, now this isn't fun.
I mean, we see that. We see one of them like leaving, like, oh, if you're going to start drinking, I'm going to start leaving because like it gets terrible after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she goes to bed. She passes out. She hears the door open. She hears footsteps in the hallway. And she's like, what are you guys doing? Like, why are you all banging? Like, what is happening? And then we hear from Glenn Close's perspective that they call for her. They're like, Alberta, help. And she comes in the room and they're all terrified on one side of the room. And then Ebony's on the other side of the room with a bat and the wall is messed up, the painted wall. And they're like, we don't really know what happened.
Yeah.
Everybody was kind of in a trance. Like, you threw us against the wall. You've got the bat. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know, because she was blacked out and they were in whatever fugue state. And Glenn Close, to her credit, is like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, get out. We cut to the next day where they're kind of getting everybody in the car to go to school. And we see that then that other lady is following them. We will meet her later. But for right now, she's just crying and staring at the house.
Yeah.
But we cut to her kids at school. And this might as well have been like ripped directly from Hereditary.
Yeah.
Now, it was wild that the youngest kid ends up throwing and eating his feces at school. That was a bizarre inclusion.
There's so much about that I don't love.
I don't love it.
Yeah.
I don't.
This is really just showing how like abuse can manifest in the children that are receiving that abuse publicly.
This is why that storyline would have been better.
I know.
Because we see Nate inappropriately laughing. And from what we've seen of Nate as a person, that's not something he would ever laugh at.
It's out of character for all of them, honestly, Paige.
For all of them.
Yeah.
She's bleeding it appears as like a period, but then they have her going through what I would assume is a sexual assault kit later because they suspect abuse in the home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what happens because there's no dialogue in those flashes.
Right.
But yeah, something's going on.
Yeah, because they essentially, they put Dre through psychological testing. The other two they have in kind of checked into the hospital for different things. And Glenn Close and Ebony get there. And Ebony is like, what is happening with my kids? Do more tests, do more tests. And I do think there is a piece of this because the doctor is also white and there is a real life bias that I'm sure Ebony has been on the receiving end of and is feeling like she's not being heard because she's like, this is out of character. I know I didn't do this. Something is messed up. But then on the flip side, you got Glenn Close, this doctor who were like, there's a bunch of bruises on your kids, girl. Like, we have to report. We have to report. Like, this is what this is.
And they do. And I realize that, like, she isn't really abusing them. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't, because the haunting is clearly happening and that exists in this movie.
Right, right.
I don't disagree with any of, like, Ebony's stance on all of that because she's right.
Right.
But they should be removed from the home because the home is haunted.
Right.
So, like...
Well, and we come back to this every time we do because for some reason haunted houses like Ouija and like half the ones in the Conjuring universe, it's always a single mom with kids trying her best because it feels vulnerable and there's always the like, well, maybe they'll take the kids away. And it's like, well, yeah, because 90% of the time, 99% of the time, probably, when someone says, I'm hearing voices and I think my kids are possessed, those kids are not safe there.
They're in danger. Yeah.
They in danger. You should take them to some place where they are more safe. That'll come into play in the real life haunting when we talk about it after.
Yay.
Yay.
Kind of makes me sad, but I guess we'll get there.
We'll get to it. Anyway, she and Glenn Close get in a fight, but they do ultimately go back to the house. And she's just like, if I see you beat those kids, if I hear about any of it, I'll turn you in. I don't give a fuck. which, to be honest, yeah, if you see someone hitting their kids, turn them in.
Yes.
Don't hit your kids, man.
Yeah.
Don't hit your kids. Anyway, she gets Shantae to get in her car, but they ultimately all go back to the house.
Yeah.
We cut to later that night. She's washing Dre's hair. The phone rings and no one else seems to be able to hear it because everyone's around it, but they're not reacting. She goes to answer. And then while she's answering the phone, Nate tries to drown Dre.
Yeah.
Like
in the tub.
Drown him.
Yeah.
Yes. Meanwhile, she's getting the phone call about the cancer payments that she can't make. And her mom is hanging across because her mom, I think, is like, something's in this house. Like,
yeah,
it's haunted.
100%.
I have fully bought into the haunting. It's bad. So they run upstairs. Nate's trying to drown him. She pulls him off. She calls for her mom, and it takes both of them to pull Nate off. And then Nate kind of wakes up out of that fugue state and is like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. What is happening?
Yeah, because he's possessed, kind of, although it's all channeled through the child that he was trying to drown, but still.
Right.
Yeah.
But still. And again, we have blown through this. We are only technically halfway through this movie.
I know.
Story-wise, because all of this is happening before really messed up stuff starts to happen. Because,
but Paige, we did just talk about one sibling trying to drown another sibling in the tub. That's pretty messed up. But I understand what you're saying.
That's pretty messed up. But it's at like an hour and 10 minutes into the movie.
I know.
Anyway, she goes to answer the door for Cynthia, and she's like, the kids are asleep. It's a bad time. Because the kids have been up all night because fucked up shit happened. And she's like, I gotta come in. And she's like, you can't keep the kids out of school. And I'm like, I'm sorry. If the last time they were in school, which was the day before, they were hospitalized, I think they can take a day off.
Yeah.
Like this was...
I might need a week.
Yeah.
Guys, my youngest ate shit and threw it at the teacher.
Yeah.
We're going to need a minute.
Yeah.
But also, if social services comes to your house and they're in this situation.
Sure.
Because they're like an active member in that community of social work, right? Like they have stipulations they have to meet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, you cannot tell them no. You have to let them in.
Yeah.
Which is what happens.
And she's like, the house is making them sick. I can feel it. I'm hearing things. I talked to the doctor at the hospital, but they didn't even look. And she says something really interesting where she's like, they think that the kids are doing this because they think that's what you want. And I'm like, that's bonkers. That is wild.
If you think about it from her point of view, though, like she is just a social worker who is trying to protect these kids who are getting abused, right?
Right.
If you go to the abuser's house and they say, it's not me, it's the possession that is taken over my house, I would be like, okay, we need to remove the kids now.
We're going to check you in for some extra help, and we're going to find a safe place for the kids. Now, at this point, Glenn Close is still alive, so it would be like, we're going to check you in. And your mom is going to stay with the kids. And
going to stay with the kids.
You know,
yeah, exactly.
Except that her mom comes down the stairs with a bat and is like, what's good? But this is where Monique is like, because Ebony is like, how could you do this to me? Maybe if you had your own kids, you'd understand. Which, don't ever say that to people.
No.
You don't know people's history with children or like why they don't have that. Like, it's a real callous thing to do. Don't do it. But Monique was like, oh, I had a kid and I turned my back for 2 seconds and a car hit him, which so many parents like, and she's like, there's nothing I could do. And she's right. There's nothing she could have done. It's not like she wasn't there. It like she just turned and it was a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And so she says, like, when I see people who have kids not treating them well, it turns my stomach because I'd give anything to have my kid back. And you're like, okay, she makes a little more sense. She is more humanized in this moment. But then, yes, Glenn Close comes down the stairs with a bat. And she's just like, oh, a bat? Yeah, okay, stop hitting your kids. I'll be back. Basically, like, this ain't over.
I get the feeling like if you threaten the social worker who's in charge of the case that you're involved in with a bat, they're just going to return immediately with the cops.
Of course.
So.
Like, and you don't want to do that. Like, you never want to escalate it worse, and police make it worse a lot of the time. Like, so it's, oof, yeah. Meanwhile, and this is the part where Ebony is complicated because she's out at a bar, which is not great.
Right.
Like, that's how she's handling the situation. But who should meet up with her outside the bar is, and I didn't get her name, I just have Apostle, Prophet, Evangelist. Oh, Bernice, I think is her name.
It's Bernice James. Yeah, is her name.
Bernice James.
Yeah.
And she's just like, hey, I know you've been following me. I know you're with social services. And she's like, I'm not. I am essentially a freelance exorcist, basically, is what I would call it.
Yeah.
Where she's just like, I go where God tells me to go, and I have actually worked in this house before. There's something fucked up in that house. The last time I tried, I lost them because I thought I got the demon out. I didn't. It possessed everyone. And the mom became a family annihilator. Very unusual. Statistically, almost insignificant. Almost never happens.
Not only did she family annihilate, she decapitated, I guess, was that her husband? And then...
I think so.
And then hung the daughter. And then killed herself, I believe.
Yeah, strangled the baby. And it was bad. But meanwhile, back at the house, Glenn Close goes to answer the phone, but it's static. She comes downstairs to find that, like, everything smells like death and the crucifix is on fire. But then also she sees that Dre is kind of like passed out. She goes to try and help and she gets attacked by a demon. We don't really see it on screen, but like that is what happens to her.
It's kind of done in shadow. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, she dies.
She dies. Meanwhile, they're at McDonald's and those fries I'm hungry. So those fries looked incredible. But at McDonald's, she's like, we have to do something or else your kid could die. And she's like, hey, that little kid that died last time, what was his name? And she was like, Trey. And she was like, great, fuck. All right, well.
Yeah, we got to go back to the house immediately.
Well, but she's like, no, I stay away from my family. You're crazy.
I know.
But then she goes back to the house, smoke everywhere, goes to help Glenn Close. She's dead. Dre comes downstairs and he's like, I didn't do it. Like, it's fucked up.
Did I do that? But
oh,
no. Probably not. But I did think it was insane that Ebony comes home. The cross is on fire in her kitchen.
Yes.
She goes and grabs a fire extinguisher, does not use it. And leaves the room. And then the scene continues for like 4 minutes with her kitchen just on fire. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if they paid attention when filming and editing this movie, but that's a huge gap in like the probability of any of this happening.
Well, and, the crucifix itself seems to be on fire and nothing else seems to be burning, but you can't verify that in the moment. I would have still extinguished it. Like,
yeah, if I see anything in my house on fire, I'm not going to be like, oh, that's just like a demon fire, and it will not go to the other parts of the house because famously demon fire you have to invite into your house.
Right.
Like that's not, what? No, you just would put it out.
Right.
Or your house would burn down.
But
she does behave like she behaved when she was talking to the exterminator guy.
Yeah.
Because when he was like, hey, I need to be paid for this, she's like, call the landlord. So I guess she was like, oh, fire? Well, that's a landlord issue. That fire's got to call the landlord.
She does literally walk away from it. It was bonkers.
All she had to do was squeeze. She was so close to putting it out.
She was aiming at it. I know. It drove me nuts as well. I also have it in my notes. I was like, what? But the ambulance comes. Grandma is dead.
Yeah.
Cynthia shows up to take pics of the burning cross and the flies and looks through one of the walls. Shit's fucked up hospital. It's not good.
Yeah.
So she piles the kids in the car and they're like, where are we going? And she's like, I don't know. Like just away from that house or whatever. And at this point, Shantae is like, I called Cynthia. I had to. Somebody has to do something now that grandma is gone. I have to keep my siblings safe. I called her.
It's the right call, man. Like, they need to be out of that house.
Yeah. And at this point, this is where Ebony is like, do you have any idea how hard it is? Like, do you want me to go to jail? And it's like, no. And I understand that it is hard, but like, those kids need to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, it is a hard decision, and maybe like voluntarily getting some distance would be good for everybody. You can kind of fix your stuff, get their stuff, work on it. But in the back seat, it's evil Dre, where he's like, it's all your fault. Your mom's dead. Like, it's not good.
It's not good. Yeah.
She pulls the car over. She runs into a bar, like a restaurant, is like, something is killing my kids, please help. And everyone in the restaurant runs out. And the kids are just like, hi, like, we're just in the car.
Where are we?
Where are we?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And she's like sitting and crying in the rain. Like it is, it's an effective scene.
Yeah.
But I understood why the next time you see them, it's like she's being questioned by, like, I assume the police. And those kids are in custody, more or less.
I assumed that she was being questioned for a psych hold.
She was. They reference it later because the Monique
302.
Yeah, that's when she references the 302 code. She's like, I talked them out of 302ing you, which is their involuntary psychiatric hold in Pennsylvania, which you can hold people for up to 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was interesting that we got a local one, because usually in movies they say 5150, which is just California, or Baker Act, which is like you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did like that it was what it would have been.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah.
But so she goes through the psych eval, and it's like, and this is where we get the question about marijuana or whatever. It's like, do you get confused? Do you sometimes not recognize your surroundings? Which I think is them determining, like, is there something more serious going on that we need to medicate?
Are you possibly schizophrenic? Like, yeah.
Yes, yeah. But this is where Cynthia is like, it's temporary, it's not forever, but I think it's best for everyone. And had it, like, if I could be 100% sure that the kids would be okay in the system that they are going to, yes, I 100% agree. This is, everyone needs some time, right?
Yeah.
But she's like, it's a church foster care. I was like, hit or miss.
I would say their current situation is full ass haunted by the demon. So like,
sure.
church foster care is a better step, I would assume.
Yes.
Especially in this world where God actually exists.
Right.
It's provable. Like when she becomes very Christian at the end of this movie and is like, Monique, have you heard the good news? And gives her that cross. I was like, that is the right way to react to the proof that she's experienced that God exists.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I do love the kind of like Rocky adjacent montage we have of her getting
God now. Yeah.
Getting God now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she goes and finds that lady, the exorcism lady who has a house church. I am always suspicious of house churches. Our neighbors have one. It seems to be okay. Sometimes they make us pupusas. But I'm always a little wary because so many cults start that way.
Paige, every cult starts that way.
I mean, that's fair. At some point, people do live in a house. But like,
honestly, every religion starts that way.
That's fair. And it does seem to be like a nice house and they're having a good time. And she's just like, oh, fuck all this. That haunted lady's here. Let's go.
Yeah.
And like they go to what I assume is like another room in that lady's compound where she's just like, we got to make you strong. We got to make you strong to fight the devil. Meanwhile, those kids be possessed as fuck.
Right.
They have that kid strapped down and Monique comes in and is like, why is he strapped down? Like, do you remember me? Like, what's happening? And then the kid's like, boom, like just like pops the restraints off and then spider crawls up the wall and you're like, oh shit. Oh, shit.
I don't think this CGI looked great. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, it looked terrible in a hilarious way.
It lacked any sort of weight. And I mean that literally. Like,
yes,
it looks like he goes from a child that actually like weighs 85 to 100 pounds to weightless.
It's the speed.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the speed. And this is something that people don't think about when they do stuff like this in exorcism movies because they're trying to disconcert you. Like that's the whole reason to do that visual thing. But you gotta do it slow, the way a person would do it. They're still confined to that body.
Yeah.
Now, there is like a back bend later when she's fighting herself that I think is incredible. Really well done. But this is not so much well done because he just like skitters up the wall like it's nothing.
Yeah, the mirror match at the end, it's not nearly as bad as this.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of cool effects in that. Like when she is like literally starting to speak in tongues.
Yeah.
After going full Super Saiyan, it like drags her to her knees with her arms in the air. Like,
oh, that was so cool.
That shit looked, because it had weight. Like when she moved, the physics of it actually worked.
I think they did that practically.
That's why it worked. Yeah.
It must have done practically.
Because the way a body bends when it's being pulled forward like that is the way she bends. The way he spider climbs up the wall is not the way a human body works.
Yeah.
And I realize that human bodies can't do that. I just mean like if you were that strong, it wouldn't look that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We cut back to her training with the deliverance lady.
God, 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 montage here of doing God shit. It's like that.
Well, this is where we find out that she was assaulted, and they don't even say it out loud, but it's like you have to confront the bad things that happened to you, and she like flashes back to it, and you're like, oh, assault. And then she's like, this is not transactional. You got to know that you are loved, which I do love.
Yeah.
Like she follows it up with God loves you, which great. If you believe that, wonderful. And I hope you get comfort from that. If you don't believe that, know that you are loved regardless.
Yeah.
Like someone loves you no matter what. And that's an important thing to remember, especially when you're not in a good way and maybe struggling with addiction. A lot of people end up in addiction because there's some hurt. down below and they're trying to numb it.
Yeah, a lot of it is self-medication.
Deal with the down below hurt.
Yeah, that's why a lot of treatment facilities are dual diagnosis. They do behavioral health, like mental health, and they do substance abuse because it takes both to beat it a lot of times.
Oh, a lot of times. Hey, it never hurts to partner your substance abuse therapies with just regular behavioral health therapies.
Yeah.
Always a good combo. But Monique is just like, walked out of the room and the doctor's like, I don't think we need to do a formal diagnosis. And she's like, shut the fuck up. I just saw this kid spider crawl up a fucking wall. What the fuck you want me to do about that? What the fuck? What the fuck, man? I'm like, that's a great reaction.
It is a logical reaction for what she has seen.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
I do understand why the doctor was like very Thomas about the whole thing. He was like, let me go see.
Let me go see.
Because like if a social worker told me that they saw that, I'd be like, well, that strains credulity. So I'm going to go check it out myself.
Yes. Anyway, so at this point, Ebony and Bernice are like, we got to go kidnap this child from the hospital. And I'm like, this is a bad plan. This is a bad plan. Can we not do it in the hospital?
Can you do an exorcism in the hospital, Paige? No. You can't actively abuse a child in a hospital, Paige. They will stop you.
Here's the thing. We do see in this one, it's mostly just holy water and prayer. So that seems fairly portable.
I did think it was very funny that they had just a vial full of holy water. They were shaking at it.
Yeah.
And are shaking at the kid and it would just scream. I was like, what is this doing? Like, no, we don't really know what this is doing. Are we just burning the demon over and over? What's the end game, I guess, is my question.
It's also mostly a Catholic thing. Like, I don't come from a tradition of Jesus that has holy water. Like, we don't believe in it at all. And so it's always wild to me when they're like, every time there's an exorcist, there's holy water. And I'm like, depends on your exorcism, I guess. Like,
I mean, that feels very Catholicism to me. Although I don't subscribe to any one particular belief and don't really care. So I don't pay attention to what branch of this weird thing people believe uses what during exorcisms. So I guess I say all that to say is I don't know if this, and I'm going to say it leans more Pentecostal in my eyes.
Sure.
I don't know if they do. I honestly have no idea. So it didn't bother me because I was like, that's plausible, I guess. But if you're just inconveniencing the demon with what looks like a little bit more than a sunburn,
right?
How is that going to free your son from Trey's grasp? I don't there's no explanation of what happens, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is common in these movies. This is not a criticism of just this movie. A lot of them do this.
I also find that this is kind of in contrast to some of the other things that she has said in the getting strong now montage leading up to this, where she's like, you have to not be afraid. You have to believe and you cast it out. And she's like, I don't need an intercessor. And I'm like, then why do we have the holy water? Because you should be able to do it.
Well, and she does. That's what she does at the end.
Sold. So why do we need the extra thing? And that is what she does at the end. So, and I almost wondered when she showed the holy water, she was like, I was scared. And I was like, maybe that's what she's referencing, is that she thought she needed help. And she should have just stayed in the pocket.
I mean, we're not there yet, but when she dies, her last words are no fear.
No fear.
Which I thought was a weird time to plug an apparel brand. But I actually think she might mean you have to know the fear to face it. I think it may have been KNOW.
Oh, interesting.
Not no fear. But I mean, it doesn't really say all that, but I think that she is more or less saying, don't take the holy water out of my dying hands.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to help. It'll burn, but it's only really going to piss them off.
Yeah.
It's not going to actually complete the exorcism that needs to happen.
Right. Anyway, she kidnaps that kid.
Yeah.
And in seconds, so easily. No one even questions it. She walks by the nurse's station and is like, hey, y'all. And they're like, who was that? And none of them question it. Which, we don't know all our coworkers. It's fine.
Especially in a hospital, because there's hundreds of employees in a hospital, right?
Yes.
So you can be like, oh, maybe she works in obstetrics and we don't have it on this floor or whatever, you know? Who knows?
Who knows?
I totally bought that she could, in her mother's scrubs.
Oh, 100%.
And badge, because no one looks at your picture on the badge typically, right?
Yeah.
That she'd be fine to get around most places in a hospital.
Let me tell you, I think if I put on scrubs and I have a badge thing for my day job, if I put that on and scrubs, I think I could walk through almost any hospital. And no one would notice.
Paige, I can't tell you how many clubs I've gotten into for free, by wearing headphones around my shoulders and carrying a laptop bag that's empty. Because I'm like, hey man, I got to be on stage, and they'll just let you in.
Yeah. Well, and here's the one that drives me nuts. It happens less now, but like for a long time, I would walk up to clubs and be like, I'm a comic, and I'd have to prove I was a comic, and that sucked because a comic could look like anybody, and they're like, a woman, no. So like that sucked.
Yeah, I will say a lot of that is just the privilege that I have as a white man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
People don't typically question us, and I'm only 5'9".
That's fair. You're not very imposing. But the places I have been able to just walk straight up into is the WGA script library, like the private script library, where they took one look at me and they're like, you look like you're behind the camera, and like, just let me go.
You're a bookish nerd. You belong here.
You can walk here.
Whether you have like the credentials or not, you belong here.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, and she does say the demon, they go to take him back. They're going to do the deliverance / exorcism, whatever you want to call it. But she's like, the demon's going to look like people you love. And it turns into like the love child of Gollum and Glenn Close.
Oh, you mean just Glenn Close without her wig on?
But with the teeth. The creepy teeth.
She does have creepy teeth. I did think it was funny that on the way home, I guess they stopped off at the religious lady's house to get the literal cuffs they used in the movie The Man in the Iron Mask to put on this child.
There's that and her matching sweatsuit that I couldn't. I was like,
how dare you, Paige?
She is ready. She's training.
How dare you? I wanted that to have like crosses on it.
Oh my God. Just gemstone style. Yes.
I know. And then have like a montage where like they're quote putting on the armor of God, and it's just like a velour tracksuit with like crosses on it. Hell yeah.
See, I follow that. We've talked about this on Cult Podcast a lot. I don't know if I think I've mentioned it to you. The guy who like pops and locks for Jesus.
Yeah, the guy who crunks for Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love you, God.
Yeah, we love you, God. Jesus Christ. Yeah. We love you, God. But he does a whole thing. Put on the armor of God, the sword of the Spirit. And you're just like pumped. I want him there as her hype man.
I would love that. That would be awesome.
He and his wife are having a baby. Good for them.
Nice. We should take one of his videos and like use After Effects to pull just him out and just put him in the back of this scene.
That would be incredible. Jesus Christ.
Oh, man. If I had like hours of free time in my day, that's the kind of nerdy shit I'd do.
Absolutely. But Glenn Close says some things I won't repeat.
I mean, Glenn Close, I think, is possessed. I mean, Glenn Close is dead, honestly.
Sure.
So this is the demon speaking. It is very troubling stuff, and I will not repeat it either.
That's right. Nope. Yeah. No need.
Yeah.
I did see a bunch of memes after this came out where it was like, Glenn Close said what? I was like,
although I'll say this, man, like she's in a movie, guys. And like, maybe we cut this page. I have complicated feelings about when an actor does this, because they're being asked by a black director to do and say these things, right?
I had this exact same thought this morning. I'm glad we're talking about this, actually.
It's like hard. Like I don't know that I can't get mad at Glenn Close for doing what she was hired to do.
No, of course not.
Now I do.
It's a wild thing to put in the script.
It is. I think it is wild. I do want to then know, like, okay, well, who created this movie?
Sure.
It makes me feel way better about it that it was Lee Daniels behind the camera saying, say these things to her, right?
Yes.
Then if it was like Elon Musk behind the camera saying these things to her, right? I would say that would make me feel very different about this scene.
Very.
But I definitely understand why people were like doing that with those memes.
Jesus, yeah.
Because it is some wild shit you would not say.
Yes. I thought about this in the sense of like, because those are words that I would never feel comfortable saying to anyone ever.
No.
And I was like, would I feel comfortable in a movie? And I landed on basically where you've landed of like, who's making the movie? What does this serve? Right?
Yeah, because I look at the director of the movie and to a large extent the creators, like the writers too,
right,
as they are writing a piece of fiction, right? And then the director is sort of like a conductor,
sure,
putting it together, right? So like that intent is important to me.
Right.
Like what their frame of reference and point of view is, not necessarily the person who they've chosen to say those things. Right. Yeah.
I also think about this in the case of like, in order to accurately represent stories, you sometimes would need an actor to portray something awful for the truth of that story.
Yes.
And that's important to me based on who is telling the story, right?
Yeah.
So like, let's say I get cast in a movie about slavery South, written and created by people of color. Like, I'm going to have to say and do all those horrible things. And it's uncomfortable for me, and I might not take a role because of that. But I also believe that there is value in representing the evil accurately.
Yeah.
Although tactfully, I guess, you know, based on whose story we're telling. I think I want it to be as honest as possible.
Yeah. I think what we're all saying is if we were cast in a movie where we had to be super racist, I would rather that movie be made by like Lee Daniels or like a Tyler Perry than like an Elon Musk type figure.
Correct.
Right. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I agree. Like I would much rather be like the angry racist guy in the neighborhood in a Tyler Perry movie than the opposite of that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. What is the intent? Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, meanwhile, at the foster care, Nate wakes up and he's like barfing and like ripping his clothes off and biting his own skin. That dude's gonna have scars forever.
He like rips his shirt, doesn't rip all the way, and then he rips it all the way, and then he starts like ripping at his chest, like at his skin on his chest,
clawing at his skin. Yeah,
it's very dark in that shot, but it does look like he's ripping skin up.
He is. He's drawing blood.
The shadow of it. It's like very. Like, he's doing damage to his body. And you see him later literally, like, biting his skin.
He's biting chunks out of his arm.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, his sister has the fucking stigmata and is floating above her bed, and no one seems to notice.
Paige, it's because it happens so often. It's like a dime a dozen. Like, oh, we got another floater. Guys, I would imagine 80 to 95% of the kids who are in foster care are there because their homes are haunted. So this got to happen all the time.
Gotta happen all the time. Meanwhile, Dre, as Glenn Close... They basically send Ebony upstairs. She doesn't stay upstairs for long, but they get into like a demon battle and it kills Bernice. Like she is like brutally injured, like beat the fuck up.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I mean, literally beaten to death, Paige.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, because that's Dr. Trey who's possessed them. And he's like, their first, like DWA's biggest hit in the early 90s was Fuck the Priest.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Coming straight from the underground.
I'm sorry, I had to. Coming at me because I'm a demon underground.
Yes. But this is where it then becomes, it's now her versus the demon, and they end up in the basement. And at first it's Dre, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, mommy. And then he like changes with the creepy eyes and the tongue. And she's like, get the fuck out of my kid.
Yeah. The kid who plays Dre is pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
He does a great job. I mean, I think all the performances are pretty great.
Yeah.
But this is the moment that you were talking about, because she does pick up the holy water from Bernice, but she's like shaking the holy water onto him and it's burning him. So she is doing something. It is having an effect, but it's not effective.
Right. Meanwhile, Dre turns into her, basically evil her.
Yes.
And they have a mirror fight with a dope ass backbend. Very cool.
It is very effective.
And it is all done practically. And that's why it looks so good.
I think it does look that way. And I think all they did was speed up how long it takes her to move the different positions.
Yeah.
Because that is obviously inhuman to be able to move your body that quickly.
Right.
But it does look like it's the actress actually doing those movements.
Right.
Not like somebody pinned her shoulders in like After Effects and then pulled a shoulder in a way that doesn't work, right?
Right.
Which is sort of what it looks like when he's climbing the wall in that scene.
Right.
Like they modeled his body and then made it climb it in a way a body wouldn't climb.
Right.
This looks great.
And eventually evil Ebony gets her foot on regular Ebony's neck.
Yes.
And like it shows it almost like she dies, but she goes to like a liminal space. And we hear Glenn Close's voice, which was a very strange choice. That's like, I know you don't want to talk to me, but talk to God. And it felt like in Dodgeball, where he's just like, you can do it. I believe in you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Like
honestly, that's one of my favorite Rip Torn performances and one of my favorite moments in that movie. Because it is such like all right, bye-bye.
Listen up, Crouch Stain. You can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. But that is what Glenn Close feels like in this moment.
Yeah.
And then she literally like boop, is up for round 2 and is like, give me back my child. And then the like evil her is like, nobody loves you. And she's like, God loves me and my mom loves me. And I'm like, okay. Right? And then she just like literally on her knees is just like, Jesus!
It's amazing. This is when she goes full Super Saiyan, like we mentioned before.
Full Super Saiyan, and then starts shouting in tongues. It's the coolest shit ever. I was like, man, if this movie makes speaking in tongues look cool, like...
I really think had they changed a little bit of the story to make like one point, I don't really care what point that is, just make one point. That would have helped the focus and like it would have made this land, I think, emotionally.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have laughed in the moment, but I did because it reminded me so much of Dragon Ball Z. I laughed in the moment.
It reminded me of Pope's Exorcist when the Virgin Mary comes up from that blood pool and they lightsaber fight. Like, it's that crazy.
Yeah, and that one scored too. God, 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 God. Anyway, which is Carmina Burana, guys. Get with it.
So her kid is on fire because literally she like, as she's speaking in tongues, the stigmata is happening. Her kid's biting himself. Her opposite self is on fire. And she's like, go back to where you came from. That's your hole. That's your home.
Don't you want to go to your home?
And just like cast that demon into the ground. Everyone kind of collapses and they're no longer possessed. And we see little Dre in the basement and she's like, oh my God. And you're like, oh my God, is he dead? But he's not dead.
No.
He wakes up.
Yeah.
But she did kidnap him from a hospital and there's a dead body in her house. So there's going to be problems.
Yeah. I don't know how connected, like the social worker, I forget her name in the movie, but Monique.
Cynthia, yeah.
We've been calling her Monique. Yeah. I don't know how much pull she has with like the cops because there's a dead lady in your house and you did kidnap your son from the hospital. So like, I don't think she could get you 6 months of not having your kids as your punishment for that. But
because literally the next scene is she comes over and is like, hey, how's it going? And Ebony has been through, like, her face is fucked up. Like, she got in a fight.
Yeah.
And Cynthia's like, okay, so a bit of a battle ahead of us. And Ebony's like, I'm gonna get him back though. And she's like, okay. And she's like, well, how are they doing? She's like, they don't remember, but I'm gonna be honest with you. They were fucked up and nobody is going to be like, that was the demon. Like, those kids are fucked up. And she's like, well, if it's God's will, I'll get him back. And she's like, this will help, I promise. And it's just a necklace. And I was like, what?
Well, so the reason she says this will help, I promise, is because Monique, Cynthia, says,
I wish I had the faith that you had that would happen.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think Cynthia's saying in response to, because let me set up the scene really quick. So like, she says, I'm going to get my kids back in like 6 months. And Cynthia's like, they're in a bad state. You probably won't. And then she's like, well, if God wants me to, I will. And then in response to that, Cynthia says, I wish I had the faith you had.
Yeah.
And I think that was Cynthia saying, don't get your hopes up.
Yes. Yeah.
But Ebony misreads that. And she's like, what you need is a dope ass necklace. Here's the first one free. But if your friends like it, my Etsy store is on the back. Have them buy one.
Well, and then there's like ominous music.
Yeah. I thought this is where the movie ended. In fact, we were like coordinating when we were going to record today because we both had to watch the movie before we could do this.
Right.
So I text you as it starts like zooming out from the house. I was like, oh, I'm done. And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm not.
Yep. Because we get basically a title card that's like, she got her kids back 6 months later. And you're like, how? Dead bodies.
Right.
But they're driving in the car. They're moving back to Philly. And she's like, I talked to your dad. We're going to work it out. And that's the movie.
So having seen the movie, having talked about the movie, what did you think about The Deliverance?
It's tough for me with both this and The Exorcism because I feel like they both had such clear through lines for a great emotionally grounded movie. And then we cluttered it.
Yeah.
And that's a little frustrating. I do think it's shot incredibly. All the performances are great.
Yeah.
All the performances are great. I actually do like speaking in tongues at the end.
Me too.
It's wild, but I'm here for it.
I thought it was cool.
And like, I didn't hate it. I'm a little frustrated by the writing and the structure, but like, I was never bored. Let's put it that way. Like, I do think it's a little derivative. It's a lot like most other haunting movies. This would fit in well in the Conjuring universe.
I mean, yeah, if you just added two grifters who were being held up as Christian superheroes, that would be a Conjuring movie.
Yeah.
And it would make a shitload of money.
Yeah.
But yeah, we talked about this in the very beginning. I still feel the way I felt before. Like a lot like The Exorcism in so much as that they set up a lot of great stuff and don't land it.
Right.
And I think I'm just ready for I'm looking for an exorcism movie that is not supernatural, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what I want. Because a lot of them are playing with it's the trauma that they've experienced that's causing them to act out this way. And then it ends up, oh no, just the movie set is haunted, right?
Right.
That was the big joke for me in that movie was, no, sometimes movie sets just be haunted, guys.
Yeah.
And it feels like this movie is just the house version of that. Sometimes houses just be haunted, guys.
Right.
And I feel like that's a cop-out when you set up so much trauma-causing trauma story at the beginning.
Right.
And I feel like that's why it doesn't land for me. But I do agree, like the performances are awesome. It's shot well. Some of the CGI doesn't hold up, but some of the like effects that are practical do hold up. So, I mean, I wouldn't watch this again. I think this is one you could probably skip. But if you like this type of movie, watch it.
Yeah. If you like exorcism movies, if you like movies like the ones in the Conjuring universe, you'll like this.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, for sure.
It's done well.
It is. But Paige, do you have any fun facts for us?
I do.
Well, hit us with your fun facts. Dr.
Real
Trey,
life
fun facts.
Let me go through the movie fun facts first, and then we'll talk about the real life case this is based on.
Okay.
So at the hour mark, when we're first getting the story about the family that lived in the house before them in the 90s, the young girl in the family, one of the young girls, the children, can be seen in the doorway wearing a shirt that says Antoine and Blaine hated it. This is a reference to In Living Color from the 90s, where Damon Wayans and David Alan Grier hated it.
Yeah.
That'd be the rating they would give to movies and shows they didn't like. So that was kind of placed there to like anchor it in the 90s, which I think is really funny.
That is very funny. I like that.
Monique's role was originally supposed to be Octavia Spencer, who then, I believe due to scheduling conflicts, had to be replaced. But I think Monique does a great job in this. Like,
me too. I think Monique is perfect. I don't have any notes for Monique.
Yes.
I also think Octavia Spencer could have crushed this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This cast includes 1 Oscar winner and 3 Oscar nominees. So Monique obviously won for Precious back in the day. But then Glenn Close has been nominated. Andra Day, who played Ebony. And I believe it's pronounced Anjanou Ellis Taylor, who played the Deliverance minister. So Bernice. So while this film is set in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the events on which the film is based took place in Gary, Indiana.
Oh, that checks out. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the case in Gary, Indiana. So in November of 2011, LaToya Ammons and her mother, Rosa Campbell, and her 3 children, then ages 7, 9, and 12. So I feel like for the movie, they aged up the 2 oldest and then maybe kept the youngest around 7. They moved into a house located at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. I don't mind giving you the address because it is no longer there. We'll talk about it in just a bit.
Well, they talk about it in the movie. The place got bulldozed in 2016.
Yes, we'll talk about it because it's complicated.
I'm sure it's way more complicated, but that's what the way they position it in the movie. Yeah, they tell you.
Yep. So days after they moved in, they claimed that black flies swarmed the porch in December and kept returning repeatedly. Now, it is a porch. I don't know if you know much about porches. Things die under them a lot. I think that's probably what happened.
Probably.
However, Rosa Campbell, LaToya Ammons' mom, said that she heard footsteps in the basement and the doors creaking. And later, she alleged to have witnessed a shadowy figure of a man pacing in the living room and found a boot print. She then claimed that she was choked by an unknown force. And LaToya Ammons' 12-year-old daughter had claimed to have levitated above her bed unconscious during a sleepover with a friend. That was not necessarily corroborated by anybody, though. They were said to have prayed until the girl returned back to bed, but her daughter has no memory of the incident. Their older son was allegedly thrown across the room by an unknown force. The younger son allegedly had his eyes roll into the back of his head and was growling, saying, "It's time to die and I will kill you." Now, they reached out to a doctor on April 19th, 2012, Jeffrey Onyekuwu, and he visited the house during the supposed haunting. And his professional opinion is that they were suffering a shared delusion. And so his office contacted the police. And after the police arrived, the children were taken to a hospital for further study. The older boy was described as acting rationally, while the younger boy screamed and thrashed. Now, because they go to a hospital with the police, the Department of Child Services was alerted to the family, and they believed that the children were performing for their mother. Now, some news outlets, including the New York Daily News, reported that child services personnel had witnessed the youngest boy walking up the wall backwards.
They do sort of show that in the movie.
A 37-year-old police captain named Charles Austin, who was one of the police that visited the house, actually believed that the paranormal activity occurred in the house. And there is a photo published by the Indianapolis Star that claims to show a shadowy figure when no one was home.
Okay.
So they hired a reverend to perform an exorcism. He interviewed the family on April 22nd, 2012. So they're doing this like rapid succession.
Yeah.
He concluded, probably because his job depends on it, that they were being tormented by demons. He performed 3 exorcisms, 2 in English, 1 in Latin, and 1 was specifically performed on LaToya herself. But ultimately, they moved to Indianapolis later that year, and the events were said to have completely stopped.
Because sometimes houses just be haunted, guys.
Sometimes houses just be haunted. The physician that was originally called to the house has been skeptical of the entire incident. He's claimed many times that he never witnessed any paranormal incidents. And in his medical notes, he wrote, delusions of ghosts in the home and hallucinations. They had a history of irregular school attendance and complaints filed against them in 2009. And so he believed that there was abuse happening in the home. Now, the police chief that claimed to believe this was a believer in the supernatural, including ghosts, prior to it coming to the house. So I would say there's a bias there.
Yeah.
So the photo that people have claimed shows a shadowy figure is of indiscriminate origin. People are not entirely sure when it was taken, how it was taken. They can't verify it. The landlord, a man named Charles Reed, also claimed to never experience any supernatural events at the house. No tenants before or after seemed to have had any problems. However, Ammons was behind on the lease and did claim that they did not need to pay any additional payments because of the paranormal activities.
I don't think that's how that works, but all right.
A lot of people believe that maybe she was trying to break her lease and that's what happened. The tenant who moved in after her did not notice any paranormal events either. So many people believe it was a hoax. The children were interviewed by multiple psychologists and other mental health professionals, and they concluded that they believed that the children were acting deceptively and backing up their mom's story. And so there have also been claims that they would mostly act possessed whenever they were challenging part of their stories or didn't wish to answer. Now, in 2014, Zach Baggins of Ghost Hunter fame.
And cousin of Bilbo, but yeah.
Purchased the house for $35,000 before demolishing it 2 years later in January of 2016. However, he didn't demolish it until after filming a documentary in it titled Demon House. It was released in 2018. However, Steve Barton of Dread Central calls it one of the single most compelling documentaries of the existence of the supernatural that I've ever witnessed. However, the Los Angeles Times reviewer, a man named Noel Murray, called the film, quote, hooey.
Love it.
It has been characterized by most as a pseudo-documentary, meaning filmed in a documentary style, but doesn't portray real events.
Yeah.
And those are your fun facts.
Well, thank you for those fun facts page. Let's talk a little bit about box office, although this didn't really get a theatrical release.
Right.
It did play in some select theaters, but it didn't get a full theatrical release. But I do have the budget, and I was able to find around how much Netflix paid for it. So
nice.
We're going to play with that. Paige, what do you think the production budget for this movie was?
Ooh, I think this is largely a single location because it's mostly in the house.
Yeah.
With a few shots outside. You do have some star power in it.
Yeah, a lot.
So I'm hoping those people got paid well. I would say you could probably make this movie for $10 million.
You probably could. They didn't, though. They made it for $30 million.
That's fair. That's a fair budget.
And I think it was probably to secure that talent, you know?
I think so too, yeah.
Because the acting is great. Okay, so again, wasn't really a theatrical release, but do you want to guess how much Netflix paid for it when they snatched up the rights to distribute it?
Ooh, I'm going to say Netflix paid $5 million to distribute this.
Oh, Paige, it's just over $65 million.
Jesus Christ. Wow. Okay.
So this movie did make money.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. But sadly, there isn't much to box office because it went straight to Netflix. And honestly, it's more information than I normally have because box office that goes to Netflix, we don't normally see how much they pay for stuff. But there was an article that referenced it. So I was like, oh, sweet. I actually have this information.
Nice.
Anyway, that's your box office. But Paige, you want to hit us with that scary scale?
Sure. Our scary scale is a scale of 1 to 10 of how scary we found the film today when we watched it, with 1 being Ghostbusters and 10 being Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Todd.
I'm going to give it a 3. There are some tense moments. I don't think it's super suspenseful, and there aren't a ton of jump scares, though. So it is very, like, you could get through this. But there are some tense-ish moments.
I'd give it maybe a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's your scary scale.
All right. Well, Paige, this week you made us watch The Deliverance. What are you going to make us watch next week?
I'm going to give you a little bit of a break this week.
Oh, hell yeah.
You and I have both been having a rough time doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But also, I went back through our archives and realized we hadn't touched this franchise at all yet. So I'm actually really excited. From the Wayans brothers, we are doing scary movies.
All right.
And you finally have seen the movies, so you could like get the jokes. It'll be great.
And I have seen Scary Movie. It's been probably since high school.
Quite a long time.
Yeah, it's been forever since I've seen it.
You'll probably get the jokes now because you've actually seen the movies it's based on.
I didn't get them when I saw it initially. I was like, oh, I get some of these, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess our homework is to revisit Scary Movie, and I'll see how many references I get this time as we enjoy that, and check back for that episode next week.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you.
Me too. That should be fun.
Hey, do you have any reviews for us?
Yeah, so this week I'm going to read a Spotify comment that came in on our most recent episode, that episode being the revenge episode. And this one comes from Axir. It's Axecir. Axir, maybe? And they say, people in healthcare still use pagers, by the way, and fax machines. So I guess we talked about that in the revenge episode, but why would they still use fax machines?
Insurance companies require people to use fax machines. And here's what's up. It's absolutely a way for them to not fucking pay you. It's to make it harder to submit claims. That's fucking real. And if your insurance company is demanding things by fax, call them on it. Call them on it. They absolutely have the ability to take claims other ways, and they are making it hard for you. This is just from day job, but yeah, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do still use fax machines.
That's crazy to me. But Axer, thank you so much for that Spotify comment. And if you want to have me read your Spotify comment or 5-star Apple review, leave us one of those things and I'll do just that. So guys, if you like this show but want to hear Paige and I talk about romantic comedies or just regular romantic movies, check out our other podcast. Some might call it a sister podcast called Romancing the Pod, where we do just that weekly. It's a lot like this show, but for romance and romantic comedies, because Paige doesn't like them. So we make her watch them, just like you guys make me watch horror over here. But if you want to follow me, I am at Todd J. Awesome on all the social media. Paige is at Rampage Wesley on Instagram?
Yes, and TikTok.
And just Paige Wesley on Twitter, because you got that before some CEO lady and she wanted it, but you wouldn't give it back. And I respect you for that.
Refuse.
Also, Paige
Suck it, other Paige Wesley.
Paige is also on another podcast. It's great. You should check it out. It's called Cult Podcast with Armando Torres, who is a wonderful person. And if you want to support this show, go to Patreon at patreon.com/horrorvirgin, where there are a lot of great levels and a lot of great things. We do the Patreon shout outs at the beginning of every episode. We do listener requests, stuff like that, bonus episodes. So you'll be getting all of that content, plus episodes a day early with no ads, and who doesn't love that? So sign up for the Patreon and get a lot of great stuff.
That's going to be it for us, you guys. I'm Paige.
And I'm your horror virgin, Todd.
Keep it ooky spooky.
Yeah. Have an amazing week, guys. Bye. Now all I want is a Super Saiyan Jesus and nerds.